Have you ever felt like your mind sees things others don't? Like the questions you ask make rooms go silent. Like the clarity you gain only builds more distance between you and the world. If so, you're not alone. You may even have asked yourself, why does understanding more make me feel more alienated? This isn't a flaw in your thinking, it's the weight of it. In a society that craves predictability, deep insight is not welcomed with applause. It's met with fear. Intelligence, when it dares to dig beneath the surface, doesn't inspire unity. It provokes discomfort. And when that intelligence is matched with emotional honesty and sovereignty, the refusal to conform or self-censor for comfort, it becomes something society labels as dangerous. But dangerous to what? Not to truth, to illusion, not to harmony, but to the fragile peace built on denial. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most radical and unflinchingly honest philosophers of the 19th century, understood this better than anyone. He did not romanticize knowledge. He didn't see truth as liberating in the way Enlightenment thinkers had painted it. To him, truth was a curse, as much as a gift, a torch that burns, as much as it illuminates. What you're about to hear is more than a script. It's a manifesto, a call to those who feel out of place, not because they are lost, but because they are ahead. It is a guide for reclaiming emotional sovereignty in a world that misunderstands and often punishes clarity. This is the paradox of deep thinkers. The more they see, the lonelier they become. But within that loneliness lies a choice. Do you suppress your truth to belong, or do you honor it, knowing that your solitude may be the price of authenticity? Let's go deeper. Let's start with the question that defines the experience of every deep thinker. Why is intelligence often met with resistance instead of reverence? It seems paradoxical. We celebrate innovation, praise genius, idolize visionaries. After they're gone. But when intelligence appears in real time, especially in the form of challenging ideas or uncomfortable observations, it's often met with defensiveness, dismissal, even hostility. This isn't just a quirk of human behavior. It's an evolutionary defense mechanism. Human beings evolved to survive in tribes. In our ancestral environment, being accepted by the group wasn't just helpful, it was essential. Rejection meant isolation, and isolation meant death. So our brains became wired not for truth, but for belonging. Enter the deep thinker, someone who questions tradition, who challenges unspoken assumptions, who doesn't just think outside the box. They question why the box exists in the first place. Such a person is dangerous, not because they intend harm, but because they threaten the harmony of the group. Harmony built not on truth, but on consensus. Think about this. When someone lifts more than you at the gym, you admire them. When someone has more money, you might envy them. But when someone understands something at a level you can't reach, or worse, points out something you've never questioned, you feel exposed, vulnerable, less than. This is what psychologists call the mirror effect. The deep thinker doesn't just bring ideas, they bring confrontation, not always by intention, but by presence. Their clarity reflects the unexamined life of those around them, and people rarely forgive that. Most people identify with their beliefs. They don't wear them like clothes. They wear them like skin. So when those beliefs are questioned, it feels like an attack on the self. That's why even the most respectful, nuanced question can cause an emotional explosion. You're not challenging an idea, you're challenging identity. And the ego doesn't go down without a fight. Add to this the fact that most people today are cognitively overloaded. Notifications, short-form content, constant marketing, responsibilities, emotional noise. There's little room left for stillness, for contemplation, for peeling back the layers of existence. So when a deep thinker enters with big questions, why are we doing this? What is the real cost of our convenience? What if everything we've built is a house of cards? They're not just hard to understand, they're hard to bear. Society's resistance to intelligence is not always conscious. It's a reflex, a protective mechanism. And it's not limited to strangers. It can come from friends, family, colleagues, anyone whose inner peace depends on not questioning too much. This is where emotional sovereignty becomes vital. If you measure your worth by how much people agree with you, you'll be crushed by this resistance. But if your compass is internal, anchored not in applause but in authenticity, you can continue to see clearly without being destroyed by society's blindness. Truth often travels alone, but that doesn't make it any less true. History doesn't just suggest this pattern, it screams it. From ancient Athens to modern global politics, society's response to those who think too deeply, too honestly, has been remarkably consistent. Exile, silence, ridicule, punishment. Start with Socrates. His only real crime was asking questions people didn't want to answer. His method, the Socratic method, wasn't a weapon, but a mirror. And that mirror was too much for a society built on appearance, reputation, and tradition. His trial was never about justice. It was about fear. Fear of the man who could not be fooled by polite illusions. Galileo simply looked through a telescope and described what he saw. But the truth contradicted centuries of religious dogma. So he was forced to deny what he knew to be real. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest, not for creating lies, but for unveiling them too soon. Hypatia, a woman who dared to teach logic and reason in a male-dominated empire. She was dragged through the streets, brutally killed by a mob. Her very existence challenged patriarchal authority and religious orthodoxy. So she was erased from history for centuries, until modern scholars rediscovered her brilliance. Fast forward. Alan Turing cracked the Nazi Enigma code, saved millions of lives, but his homosexuality was unforgivable to the British state. He was chemically castrated, died by suicide. Decades later, they apologized. But where was their gratitude when it mattered? Edward Snowden, working inside the intelligence machine, he discovered illegal mass surveillance. Instead of being protected as a whistleblower, he became a fugitive. He revealed how power listens to our private lives, and for that, he was condemned. Julian Assange published documents exposing war crimes, corruption, and lies at the highest levels of government. The world didn't thank him. It silenced him. He now sits in a prison cell, while the institutions he exposed continue to operate unchecked. James Baldwin held up a mirror to America. He exposed the cracks no one wanted to see, racism, classism, identity denial. He didn't yell, he didn't sensationalize, he simply spoke with precision. And yet, his truth was so piercing, he had to leave his country to find peace. Each of these people stood in the same place you may stand today, not on a pedestal, on the edge. On the edge of culture, of tradition, of what society calls acceptable. They were not always right in every detail, but they were right in essence. They saw what others were not ready to see. And society reacted the only way it knows how, when its illusions are threatened, with violence, isolation, silence. It's easy to look back now and romanticize their courage. But during their lifetimes, these thinkers weren't celebrated. They were feared. So if you feel like your insights are unwelcome, remember this: rejection is often the first response to revelation. You don't have to be Galileo to know what it feels like to tell an uncomfortable truth and be dismissed. You don't have to be Turing to know what it means to serve a system that has no use for your humanity. You don't have to be Baldwin to know the pain of speaking clearly and being ignored. The pattern is clear. It repeats across centuries, continents, cultures. But here's the truth. The deeper you think, the more likely you are to make others uncomfortable. Not because you intend harm, but because clarity unsettles comfort. And for most of human history, comfort, not truth, has been the dominant priority. The question is, will you sacrifice your clarity to protect others' comfort? Or will you stand firm in the knowledge that even if society resists you now, truth will always find its moment? Because history doesn't just remember the powerful, it remembers the ones who saw clearly when it was still dangerous to do so. To understand why intelligence and deep thinking often provoke such discomfort, we need to look beneath culture and history into the machinery of the human mind itself. Psychologists and neuroscientists have spent decades asking a simple question: why do people resist new ideas, especially when those ideas challenge long-held beliefs? What they've discovered isn't surprising to philosophers like Schopenhauer, but it does validate something ancient. Truth makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort triggers defense. The human brain is not wired for truth. It's wired for safety. And for most of human history, safety was found in predictability, consensus, conformity. Our ancestors survived by aligning with the tribe, not by standing out. Being part of the group meant access to food, shelter, protection. Being excluded meant danger, even death. That evolutionary wiring is still with us. The need to belong is hard-coded into the neural architecture. The amygdala, our brain's threat detection center, doesn't just react to physical danger. It reacts to social threats too. And what could be more threatening than someone who questions everything the group takes for granted? When a deep thinker enters the room and begins to peel back assumptions, the brain of the listener doesn't calmly evaluate. It reacts. Adrenaline, cortisol, defensiveness. What's perceived isn't, oh, an opportunity to learn. It's, I'm under attack. That's why you can calmly offer a fact or perspective and still trigger emotional backlash. It has little to do with your tone, everything to do with their subconscious response. Let's break this down with 3 key psychological mechanisms. 1. the backfire effect. When people are presented with evidence that contradicts their beliefs, they don't open their minds. They become more entrenched. Why? Because the new information isn't seen as helpful. It's seen as hostile. And if that belief is central to their identity, religion, politics, values, the reaction is even stronger. 2. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Those with low ability often overestimate themselves. Those who are truly informed tend to doubt themselves. This creates a frustrating paradox. The loudest voices are often the least informed. The wisest are silent. So social groups reward mediocrity, not mastery. 3. Status quo bias. The brain prefers the familiar. Familiar feels safe. Unfamiliar truths feel risky. So people cling to tradition, even when the tradition is broken, even when the truth is clear. A person who tells a comforting lie will always be more popular than the one who tells an inconvenient truth. This isn't cynicism, it's biology. And biology doesn't respond well to disruption. That's why even when people say they value critical thinking, they often mean, I want to question others, but don't question me. This becomes even more volatile in groups. A 2021 Stanford study found that people are more receptive to complex ideas one-on-one. But in group settings, status anxiety takes over. Now they're not just reacting to ideas. They're worrying. Do I look dumb? Will others think less of me? So the thinker becomes the threat, not for being wrong, but for being too right, too soon. This is how deep thinkers are sidelined, at work, in social groups, even in families. They don't fit the mold, not because they're arrogant, but because their very presence destabilizes comfort. The emotional cost of clarity is often social distance. This is why so many thinkers turn inward. They write, they paint, they observe, because spoken truth is often too radioactive. But let's take this further. What happens to a society that silences its most perceptive voices? It begins to decay. Groupthink, stagnation, self-deception. The lies that once protected comfort become cages. In the short term, rejecting deep thinkers protects egos. In the long term, it destroys evolution. Schopenhauer saw this coming. He didn't need neuroscience. He just watched the world, honestly. His conclusion: most people will not tolerate truth unless it flatters their sense of self. To pursue truth is to risk rejection, but to avoid truth is to remain forever small. So ask yourself, which discomfort can you live with? The loneliness of clarity or the conformity of ignorance? One offers pain, the other numbness. Only one leads to growth. We are not living in ancient Greece, medieval Rome, or the Enlightenment era, and yet the patterns persist. Today's world, despite its technological sophistication, still punishes intellectual depth. In fact, it may do so more ruthlessly than ever before, only now it hides that punishment behind silence, distraction, and digital noise. Let's begin with the cultural environment. We live in the attention economy, a digital battlefield where every click, swipe, and scroll is monetized. Algorithms rule what we see, and algorithms don't reward depth. They reward emotional impact, outrage, amusement, controversy, and affirmation. Content that makes you feel quickly and intensely spreads. Content that makes you think, that lags, A complex idea wrapped in nuance is no match for a meme that confirms a bias. Social media, which once promised to democratize thought, now functions like a popularity contest on steroids. The more shallow and reactive the content, the wider it spreads. And this presents a challenge for deep thinkers. Your insights take time, patience, context. But the platforms reward immediacy, certainty, and performance. This digital architecture devalues nuance and punishes humility. In many online spaces, a person who says, "I don't know," is seen as weak, while the loudest and most confident, regardless of accuracy, are elevated as authorities. This is the rise of the charismatic simplifier, the influencer, the provocateur. Deep thinking is often quiet, slow, unresolved. It doesn't lend itself well to virality. So intellectuals, philosophers, critical minds, they're either sidelined, misunderstood, or forced to dilute their ideas into clickbait just to be seen. And it's not just online. In schools, students are taught to memorize and repeat, not to question. Standardized tests measure obedience more than originality. Those who color outside the lines, who ask why instead of how, are often labeled as troublemakers. At work, critical thinking is praised in theory, but punished in practice. Companies use words like innovation and disruption, but the employees who challenge groupthink or raise inconvenient truths, they're often excluded from key decisions or quietly let go. In politics, the dynamic is even more visible. The leaders who rise aren't the most thoughtful. They're the ones who simplify reality into slogans, who offer certainty in uncertain times. People don't vote for complexity. They vote for familiarity, for identity, for the illusion of control. And in this world, online, in schools, in boardrooms, in governments, deep thinkers often feel alienated, not because they are wrong, but because they don't play the game. So what happens? Many withdraw. They shrink. They retreat into books, solitude, small circles of like minds. And while this refuge can be healing, it also deprives society of its most needed voices. Because here's the tragedy. We live in a time of existential threats: climate change, algorithmic manipulation, misinformation, social fragmentation. These aren't problems that can be solved with slogans. They require complexity, wisdom, patience, moral clarity. Exactly what deep thinkers offer. But the culture is not built to receive them. It rewards the fast over the thoughtful, the charming over the honest, the confident fool over the uncertain genius. And so, we slide further into noise. Yet, beneath that noise, there is a growing hunger, a fatigue with superficiality, a silent frustration that many carry without knowing its name. The truth is, people are starving for meaning, for depth, for authenticity. They just don't know where to find it, or how to recognize it when it whispers instead of shouts. This is the challenge and the opportunity of our time. Deep thinkers are not just needed, they are essential. But to reach others, they must navigate the landscape without losing their integrity. They must become translators of truth, not diluters. They must find new forms to carry old wisdom. They must speak clearly, without condescension, with conviction, but not arrogance. Because while society may resist intelligence at first, it eventually circles back to it. The thinkers who were mocked yesterday, Become the prophets of tomorrow. Your voice may not go viral, your ideas may not trend, but they may plant seeds in the minds of those ready to awaken. And those seeds matter more than you think. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that the engine driving human existence wasn't reason, or love, or even morality. It was the will, a blind, insatiable force, rooted in desire, instinct, and survival. He called it the will to live. According to Schopenhauer, this will operates beneath the surface of our consciousness. It compels us to seek pleasure, avoid pain, pursue sex, wealth, power, food, distraction, whatever keeps us moving, even if it keeps us blind. The will to live doesn't care if you're wise. It only cares that you continue to exist. But not everyone is fully governed by this primal force. In rare cases, individuals begin to separate from the herd. They begin to question the values others take for granted. They grow less interested in winning status games and more interested in understanding the rules behind them. These individuals, Schopenhauer said, are governed by a different impulse, the will to truth. The will to truth is not interested in survival for survival's sake. It doesn't care about comfort, conformity, or applause. It wants only to see clearly, even if that clarity leads to suffering, even if it leads to alienation, even if it leads to the collapse of everything one once believed. To live by the will to truth is to accept that some answers you find will hurt. That looking too closely at human nature, society, or even your own mind can be disorienting. You may lose friends, you may lose meaning, you may lose the very illusions that once gave you hope. But you will gain sovereignty. Because the will to truth doesn't just awaken the mind, it liberates the soul. It breaks the spell of unconscious living. It replaces passive existence with active awareness. Schopenhauer saw this as the great divide between most of humanity and the rare few. While the masses are caught in a loop of desire and disappointment, those with the will to truth begin to step outside the loop. They become observers, philosophers, artists, mystics. But this path is not glamorous, it is not popular, and it does not offer immediate rewards. Instead, it requires emotional resilience, the ability to sit with existential doubt, to see the absurdity of life, and still create meaning within it. This is why so many great thinkers have suffered deeply, not because they were neurotic, but because they were awake. To see the world without filters is to see its beauty, but also its cruelty, its contradictions, its indifference. Pascal called this the infinite silence of the universe. Camus called it the absurd. Kierkegaard called it the sickness unto death. Schopenhauer simply called it the human condition. And yet, despite the burden, those who pursue truth over comfort are the ones most capable of transcendence. They are the ones who become truly free. Because they no longer live by borrowed values, they no longer chase distractions to avoid themselves. They have faced the chaos and learned to navigate it. To live by the will to truth is to accept that life may never feel easy, but it can feel real. And in that reality, there is something sacred. Not everyone wants to wake up, but for those who do, there is no turning back. So, what does this mean for you? If you've always felt a pull toward questions others avoid, if you've struggled to find satisfaction in shallow pleasures, if you've sensed a quiet yearning to know what's actually going on beneath the surface, you may already be living by the will to truth. You may be part of that rare lineage Schopenhauer described, not just of philosophers in title, but in spirit, a lineage of seekers who would rather be rejected than deluded, rather be alone than asleep, rather live with eyes open than dreams closed. It is not an easy life, but it is a sovereign one. You've traveled through history, psychology, and philosophy. You've seen the patterns that repeat, the resistance deep thinkers face, and the pain that often walks hand in hand with clarity. But if there is one truth that echoes through all of this, it is this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. The discomfort you feel is not a flaw. It's a feature of a mind that refuses to be lulled by illusions. The disconnection you experience is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that your awareness has outgrown your environment. The silence that surrounds your insights is not proof you should stop speaking. It's proof that you are speaking from a place the world hasn't reached yet. In every age, there have been those who saw through the facade, who questioned the default, who looked deeper when others looked away. And every age resisted them. But those same ages, with time, also turned around and followed them. What you are doing by thinking, by feeling, by questioning, is laying a path. It may not be recognized, it may not be rewarded, but it is necessary. Your presence is a disruption, a beautiful one, a disruption not of peace, but of sleep. You are the alarm clock in a world that prefers dreaming. And that is a sacred role. The world may never fully understand you, but it will be changed by you. Because every time you refuse to shrink, every time you speak from the will to truth, every time you protect your emotional sovereignty in the face of rejection, you make it easier for someone else to do the same. You create space, you build bridges, you become the proof that clarity can coexist with courage. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." You see things others don't, and that vision comes with weight, but it also comes with purpose. So stand tall in your difference. Wear your solitude with pride. Speak your truth, even if your voice trembles. The world may not be ready, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to carry the torch, to keep the flame alive, to walk the path so others can find it. Let them call you difficult. Let them call you intense. Let them call you too much. That just means you're on the right path. You were not made to fit in. You were made to see farther. And one day, the world will catch up. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let your truth echo, not for attention, but for alignment. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the minds and philosophies that shape emotional sovereignty, subscribe. This isn't the end. We're just getting started.